This is Beyond Influential, with Brittany Crystal. Join Brittany as she chats with today's thought leaders about the power of influence, how it's developed, and how they get us to consume both on and offline. Here's your host, Brittany Crystal.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Beyond Influential. Today, I'm speaking with Bri Seeley, coach, speaker, and author. She's supporting women all over the world to turn their inner visions into realities. She has a new book coming out called Permission to Leap on November 14th. And she's also a great friend of mine. So I'd like to introduce you to Bri.
Hey, everyone. So excited to be here.
So Bri, if you could just give the audience a little bit of your background and how you got started doing what you're doing.
I originally opened a business as a fashion designer. So I am a trained fashion designer. I have a bachelor's and a master's in fashion, studied in Italy for several years, and ended up opening a business, becoming an entrepreneur very young. And because I was living in a city where I couldn't be a fashion designer, there were no opportunities. And so instead of moving or disrupting my life, I just started a fashion brand. And I started it just on the side. I was only doing it weekends, and little by little, I would shift my hours at work. So I would cut my hours back to 4 days a week and work on my business 3 days a week. And then I cut my work down to 3 days a week and would work on my business 4 days a week. And by the time I ended up moving to Los Angeles, I was only working 10 hours a week at my day job, which was covering all my bills, and was able to put all the rest of my time and attention into my fashion brand. That was in 2013 that I moved to Los Angeles. And it was by 2014, I got fired from that job. I say fired in quotations. They cut my pay in half, and I told them to go to hell and filed unemployment and decided I was going to figure something else out. And a year later, I realized that I wasn't having fun with my fashion brand anymore. The reason I started it, the reason I got into it in the beginning had completely gone. Because when you're owning a fashion business, it's more about business than about fashion. So I wasn't designing, I wasn't getting to create, I wasn't getting to be creative, and was ending up running a business, which was taking everything out of me. I didn't have a spiritual practice at the time and was just feeling really lost and depleted at the end of every day. And so out of the blue, I was meditating one day and got this message to shut my brand down. That was on a Saturday. And by the following Tuesday, I was announcing that my business was over. And I closed everything without even telling my mom. She's still upset about it. And then didn't really know what was next. But I started opening up I had just signed to work with a business coach and figure some things out. And little by little, my vision started kind of coming to fruition. I started coaching people. My business expanded. Of course, now 3 years later, I wrote a book. And so things have kind of unfolded over time, but it's definitely the thing I love most about being an entrepreneur is that it's a journey. Like it's never a one and done thing. And even though I feel like I've figured it out right now, that could all change again tomorrow or next month or whenever. So I really enjoy the kind of day-to-day aspect of being an entrepreneur and being able to kind of create my own life and decide what I want and make it happen.
So with the fashion, when did you realize that is something you wanted to pursue at the time? Because that's a really lofty goal, is having your own fashion brand. When you were growing up, were you always influencing other people's fashions, or how did that even come about?
So I was raised by a single mom, and then my grandparents helped raise me as well. And my grandma, bless her heart, had been a teacher forever and taught me how to sew when I was growing up. And so when I was 5, I think I have a book somewhere that I wrote when I was 5 that said my favorite thing to do was sew. And I loved sewing, and I would create and I would make little things here and there. I would steal all my mom's patterns and play on the sewing machine when I was little. And then when I got to college, I went to college a year early. So I was technically a senior in high school at the same time I was a freshman in college. And I was there and I had to take psychology and I had to take English and like some other class to fulfill my high school graduation requirements. And I wasn't paying my tuition. So I was like, well, I'll just take some fun classes. And they had a sewing class. And I was like, well, maybe I'll just up my sewing game a little bit and kind of see what I could learn, what I could make, all that stuff. And I did it. And I was like, oh, I really enjoy this. And then it was almost like I didn't question it. And I just followed that. And I kept, I transferred schools, and the next college I went to had a fashion program, and they had a cooperative with a school in New York that I was supposed to go to because I didn't end up going there, and I ended up in Italy instead, and then graduated with my bachelor's and went back to Italy for my master's. And then it was just like all these following the breadcrumbs is kind of how I've put it. I did wear some pretty outlandish things when I was little. I remember I used to love wearing neckties. And so I would wear turtlenecks to school and neckties. And I had like Looney Tunes neckties and just like crazy ones. I had all these holiday ones. I would wear hats to school. I did get made fun of a lot for what I wore in school, but I kind of never cared, just kind of did my own thing, which is totally my MO in life. I never really care and I just do my own thing. But it wasn't necessarily about influencing people at that point. It was more just about, I enjoy this and I'm good at it and I'm just going to kind of see where it takes me.
So then once you start building your fashion brand, I mean, the whole thing with fashion is you need to get people to wear it to maintain your line. So how did you get out there, get the word out there, get your designs out there?
It started small and gradual. One of the first fashion shows I ever did was at the Bellevue Art Museum up in Seattle. And I did 3 pieces, and my models fell in love with my stuff, and people fell in love with my stuff, and photographers started approaching me, and I started doing shoots, and I started creating more and more avant-garde pieces. I did a whole selection of 7 Deadly Sins dresses. Yeah, and the gluttony one was always everyone's favorite. And so lots and lots and lots of photo shoots and models and people wearing my stuff and saying yes to other fashion shows, other opportunities. I ended up showing at Magic one year, and that got me into meeting the executive director of Phoenix Fashion Week. And I entered into their emerging designer competition and I won that. And by winning that, I got contacted by LA Fashion Week and then ended up doing that and ended up being really gradual. And once I moved to LA, I started meeting all these people who knew people and got my stuff in a showroom. And all of a sudden my stuff was on the Rich Kids of whatever that show is. And Toni Braxton was wearing my stuff and like all these things. But a lot of it was being in the right place at the right time, not being afraid to step up and say, I want this. Like when I was talking to the Phoenix Fashion Week people, I was like, here's all the reasons I've never done a fashion week before. Prove to me why I should do yours. And just really made sure that things were in alignment before I said yes to them.
So then what led you to the transition to coach now?
So when I got the message that I was shutting down my fashion brand, I had no idea what was next and started just opening up to what could be possible for me. And that's when I started looking back and realizing that the universe had been tapping me on the shoulder for months. And because I had my fashion brand in my life, it was taking up all my space, all my time, all my attention, and I couldn't even see or hear that this little whisper was happening. And so once I got rid of my fashion brand, all of a sudden I had this space and I was like, people have been asking me to coach and mentor them for months. And I kept telling people no, because I was like, I don't do that. And then all of a sudden I had space and I was like, oh, what if I did do that? What if I could do that? I've been an entrepreneur for, 7, 8 years now. I have been leading and training people. When I joined a sorority within the first semester, I was on their executive leadership board. Like I have always kind of stepped up and I have all these skills and talents. Why not make them into a business?
So what were people looking to you for advice for? Was it business growth? Was it just general life questions that people wanted coaching on?
It was more, my cat's going crazy. She's deaf. And so I'd even snap at her to tell her to stop doing what she's doing, but she won't hear me. So you'll just excuse the noises. It's my cat. It was a lot of teach me to build what you've built. And not in like the fashion sense, but like it's so funny because I've been doing this for 3 years now, and I feel like I've just found my niche. But what people were asking me for 3 years ago was teach me how to bring my vision to life. And it's so funny that that's been there for the 3 years. And I just now am figuring out that like that's my sweet spot, is helping people bring their visions to life.
So how did you actually turn that into a business? Like how did you transition from fashion to that specifically?
It was easier than I thought it would be because I only ever did women's fashion, and now I only do women's coaching. I write using the feminine pronouns, and I write directing at women. All my meditations say she in them. And I just have a very female centric thing. And it was a surprisingly easy transition. So I always had an email list, and I just started sending them more life coaching emails rather than fashion emails. And some people unsubscribed, but most people didn't. And I think more than anything, when people have supported me in the past, they didn't support me because I was a fashion designer. They supported me because I was me. And so I have carried through, obviously, in all the businesses, and people rally around me. And it's awesome, and it's really powerful, and it's exciting. And I think that's just been the biggest through line, is me.
What do you think it is about you that people gravitate to for your brand?
That is a great question. My initial response is like, I don't know. I'm just a girl doing a thing. Like, it's funny because I look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, I'm just this small town Midwest girl. I'm not really anything that special. But then I start looking at past that, right? Like, that's the facade that I see in the mirror. And I start looking at what other people are seeing, and the way that I speak and the way that I teach and how I make things super accessible for people. I talk a lot about straddling these two worlds. I'm constantly straddling the physical world in which we all live, and this idea of the spiritual world. And there's a lot of spiritual teachers that are so far out there that you can't connect with them. They're not human. And I think one of the gifts I have is really bridging the gap between those two worlds very easily and very powerfully. And then I teach other people to kind of do the same. So I'm not so human, and I'm not so spiritual. And then I also feel like I present as a very real person, which we were kind of talking about this before we got started recording, is that people don't want to see the perfectly manicured brand anymore. And I'm just super real. Like, I've been doing a video diary almost every day of my countdown to my book launch. And there have been a few days where I'm in tears at 5:30 a.m. just being like, I'm so overwhelmed. I'm so tired. This week I recorded one, and I was driving back from the dentist, and I was like, I am legit crabby. I wasn't mean, but I was very firm with my dental hygienist. And I was like, do whatever you need to do to get me out of here the fastest you can. I don't want to talk to you. I just get me out. So I try to also be very real. And I think people really resonate with that.
So what do most people come to you for now? How has that business evolved from when you started to now?
Last year, I started teaching manifestation, which I really enjoyed, and I'm very good at. And I'm very good at teaching, and have helped a lot of people create a lot of really amazing things in their life. And what I realized is it's too superficial for me. And so what I've transitioned into this year in particular is taking that to the next level of, yes, you can use the laws of manifestation and the tools of manifestation, but instead of manifesting a car or a dog or an apartment or a relationship, what if you could just create the life you want? All of the life, everything, and be living into your future now. Why are you waiting until this some random endpoint date to be happy or to be fulfilled or to start that thing that you've been thinking about for years. Like, let's just do it now. And so now what I am doing is helping people bring that vision to life. So whatever that whisper is, whatever that calling is, breathing life into it and really supporting people to, one, create it, and two, have a plan to continue it and grow it in the world.
So then what led you to actually writing this book?
Again, a very concise message in meditation. So the three biggest expansion points that I've had in the last 2.5 years have all been from meditation. And so I was in meditation in January. I had just committed to like a new goal for myself. And it was either the week of or the week after committing to the goal, I was meditating and got this really clear, you're writing a book this year. And you're leaving Los Angeles for 2 weeks in June to write it. And I was like, okay, like what? I can't say no to that. And so I didn't know what I was writing about. I didn't know where I was going for 2 weeks in June to write the book. And I just kept showing up and going into meditation every day and being like, use me. What am I writing about? Where am I going? How do you need this thing to come through me? And little by little, the contents for the book got revealed, and I committed to working with a marketing team. And the second I committed to them, the whole outline for the entire book came to me. I left. I got an offer to go house sit in Seattle for 2 weeks in June, out of the blue, from this couple I know. I'm actually going back to house sit for them again in December. And everything kind of fell together. And my job during the book writing process was just to continually be an open channel, to allow whatever the information that was supposed to be in this book to come through me.
So it's called Permission to Leap. Why do you think it's super important to teach people about permission? Actually, we were talking about this before on your podcast, just about, I think you asked me what gave me the permission to leave, VaynerMedia and Gary. And a part of me has a strong reaction to the word permission, because in my mind, I'm like, I don't need anybody's permission. But I think a ton of people do. And I think a lot of the people who consume content along the self-help lines, and obviously people who get life coaching, do feel like they need the permission. They need to speak to somebody to give that to them. Is that kind of where this book is going? Are you giving people the permission?
Yes, and not to spoil the ending, but my whole thing is like, you can borrow my permission. Like, I will happily lend you my permission for a moment, as long as you need it, until you're able to give it to yourself. And so that's kind of how the book ends, is like, I give you permission, but at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter, because if you're not giving yourself permission, what's the point? And so for me, it's, yes, teaching people how to get there themselves so that they can give it to themselves. Because if you're looking for external validation, anything that comes through the physical world is always going to be temporary. If you're able to give yourself that permission, like internally through like the spiritual world, like that internal unknown, unseen, that's eternal. And yes, our permission for ourselves comes and goes, and it depends on situations and circumstances and things. But the more that you can begin to come back to that, come back to you, and give yourself permission to say yes to the things that you want. I think there's so much in our world, in our society, that wants to take away that permission from us, that wants to tell us that we can't go after what it is we desire. We can't live the lives we want to be living. And so if I need to be the voice to give someone that momentary permission and learn then how to give it to themselves, then that's what I'm here for.
Is there anyone else that you look to in the space, or are you just kind of rolling to the, tune of your own drum?
There's a few people. I've always kind of been a beat of my own drum kind of person as well. I even in fashion, people would be like, who are your favorite designers? And I never looked to present day designers. My favorite designer was always Dior in the 50s, right? Like all my patterns, and I still have all my fashion patterns, were my grandmother's from the 50s. Like that's kind of what I looked to when I was in fashion. And now there are some people in the space that I absolutely, completely respect and adore. But for the most part, I kind of keep my head down and do my own thing, because I feel like if I'm following someone else's journey too closely, or if I'm too enmeshed in their content, the lines can get really blurred. And all of a sudden, I'm creating through someone else's lens instead of through my lens. So there are totally people, I totally adore and respect Danielle Laporte. You know, I've gotten to interview her multiple times. I've gotten to meet her. She's amazing. I love her voice. And I watch some of her stuff periodically as it comes up, but I don't seek out too many people just because I feel like I just need to be that channel for whatever's desiring to come through me, versus accidentally maybe grabbing someone else's content and starting to create from that place.
So what's your day-to-day look like now? I'm sure you don't have a usual day at all.
So right now, in the middle of book launch, it's a little hectic and a little busy, although I hate the word busy. I 3 days a week have my team of interns with me. I work out of my home now, which is great. I used to have an office around the corner from my home, but I got rid of it. So as Brittany and I are sitting here, we're sitting here with both my cats, like hanging out. This is like my normal. I get up at 6 o'clock every day and have a 3-hour morning routine that involves a combination of walking around Echo Park Lake, doing suspended yoga, making breakfast, feeding these 2 fur monsters, like reading, meditating, doing hypnotherapy, whatever. And then I get to work, and I typically work from 9 until probably about 4 or 5, depending, and take a break, have dinner. Sometimes I give myself the night off to just like chill out, because right now, in addition to, I've created all my content through the end of the year, but I'm doing interviews like this. I've been having 2 to 3 interviews a day and still enrolling new clients and getting all the logistics of the book. Oh my God, all the back end stuff of setting up like the bleed margins and the PDFs and the create spaces and the Kindles. And oh man, like wanted to rip my hair out this week. So it's a lot of stuff, and I have a lot of moving pieces. And on any given day, it's just really staying centered, figuring out what the priorities are for that day, delegating anything that I can't get to or that isn't worth my time, and then managing all of the other bits and pieces, the moving parts that my interns are taking care of.
So as far as influence goes, I know you have a Facebook group, and I'd like you to talk about that a little bit, but how else have you been community building?
Mostly through social media. Like that's been, even when I had my fashion brand, that was the kind of easiest, lowest hanging fruit that was free. Because of course, as a startup entrepreneur, you're operating off of a very tight budget. And so social media was always free. It was accessible. It was easy. So, Facebook page, Facebook profile, Facebook group, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. I do love Instagram. With me closing my fashion brand, that's kind of become my visual art form. So everyone looks at my feed and they're like, this is intense. And I'm like, well, I'm not making dresses anymore. So I have to channel my creative energy into something. I don't know. But yeah, my Facebook group has been the biggest thing. And I have about 2,300 people in it right now. And that's where I really deliver a lot of my best content. I'm in there every week doing Facebook Lives, giving content and tips and things. I hold a lot of space for my women on Thursdays, everyone gets to kind of like plug and promote whatever they have going on. I ask a lot of questions. I give them space to celebrate their wins. I give them space to ask for support from the group if they need help, if they need women to rally around them, if they're having a hard time. And it's a group like, I've had so much feedback from my women about the fact that they've never experienced a group like this before. And so I'm pretty diligent and pretty hardcore about keeping it as a safe space and making sure that there's no bullying. I'm in there a lot. And so I watch what's going on. It is only positive, supportive content. And people can disagree and still be positive and supportive. And that's the kind of interactions that I facilitate in the group.
Are you trying to cap the growth of that group? Are you trying to keep it only to a certain number?
Not necessarily. I haven't actively been growing it, But I'm so open. I tell my women all the time, like, invite your people. This is better when we have like really engaged community, when we have women that are showing up and doing the work and supporting one another. So I haven't really conceptualized how big it could get. I'm open to whatever comes, I guess.
So what have been the best distribution strategies for you so far? Like, what have you been doing on social that's really been working?
The biggest thing that worked last year was I did a free 7-day Facebook challenge. And so that's when I actually just started the group in June of last year. So it's only been open, I guess, a little over a year. And I thought there were going to be 30 people in the group, and it ended up being like 1,100. And I was like, where did all these people come from? And then I did it again, and that's when it got up to around 2,200. So I did the 7-day training, the free 7-day training twice in 90 days. And that was kind of my biggest expansion point. Also, that one came from meditation too. I was meditating and it was like, do a free Facebook training. And I was like, okay, what am I teaching? So that's been my biggest reach, my biggest distribution. And then I turned the 7-day free training into a paid 10-week program. And I'm actually getting ready to do another free 5-day training around taking inspired action, which is one of the steps in the 6 phases of the LEAP process.
Now I have to know what kind of meditation you do.
Honestly, it varies. Sometimes I do guided meditations. I mostly lately I have a solfeggio frequency. It's a type of I don't even know how to describe it. It's ambient sounds, and there's certain tones. And so they've tested certain frequencies of sound relating to emotions. And so things like shame and guilt are the lowest vibrating frequencies. Love is the highest vibrating frequency. And so these tones are based on different frequencies. And so I have a bunch of different ones that are like related to the chakras and related to all sorts of other different things. If you look up solfeggio frequencies on YouTube, there's a ton of them. And I'll just honestly put them on and kind of sit and center myself, bring in energy from above, kind of move it through my body and just sit there and journey through whatever I'm supposed to journey through that day, or get messages, or just be at peace and stillness for a moment. And usually Peaches, my cat that's sitting on my lap right now, is the cat that meditates with me. So she gets in my lap usually for meditations, and we hang out and meditate.
That's awesome. So you've been speaking a lot now. Is there anywhere you're speaking coming up? How did you even get into kind of getting on the speaking circuit?
It wasn't purposeful. Last year, I had a second business last year, and my business partner and I would go speak at all these things. We were getting asked to speak all the time. And then this year, when that business dissolved, I had a bunch of people just continuing to reach out to me to ask me to speak. I just did a talk at a conference in October. I am speaking at a conference in Olympia, Washington in March. That one's for sure booked for 2018. And I have a few other conversations about speaking gigs in 2018. I'm not actively pursuing things right now, but I will start to actively pursue things once the book launch kind of gets over and calms down a little bit. I'll focus a little more time and energy into it.
So which topics do you usually speak on primarily when you go give a big talk?
The ones I've been doing, especially lately, are around leaping and like what's involved in taking a leap of faith, which is everything that the book is about. The other thing I teach a lot of is this idea of our future self. So Einstein was quoted as saying, our past, our present, and our future are all simultaneously coexisting in every moment. And I just thought it was fascinating. I was like, well, really, the main thing that's standing between me and this idealized future image that I have of myself is me. It's my perspective. It's my perception of where I'm at, my thoughts, my beliefs, all these things. And so I put together this cool meditation of like, what if you could sit down and interview your future self and ask her all about her life? Ask her what she believes. Ask her what her habits are. Ask her what she prioritizes in her life. And then if you're able to kind of start incorporating those things into your present moment, then all of a sudden that's not your future, that's your present. And so I teach a lot about this idea of future self, and how do you connect to your future self? How do you speak to her? How do you learn to like make decisions from her perspective versus your perspective? And so that's another one of my keynotes that I give. And then I think I have a third one up on my website, but I can't remember what it is at this moment.
So we're talking about this a little bit before the podcast, but when did you first realize that you could influence the people in your life?
It's funny because I don't know if I've ever even really considered this. Like, I guess that, yes, of course I'm doing that, but I never really have thought about it. When I was little, I would go to work with my mom. So my mom worked at a college, and single mom, I would go there after school, and I would train her employees about how to use the cash register, or I'd show them how to restock the shelves. Or, I was like this little 5-year-old, right? Hanging out with 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, getting them to like do things, like directing them. And then when I was 15, my parents bought a store, and I was training all our employees and doing payroll and doing scheduling and like all these other things. And I guess looking back on it, like, I guess I've kind of always known that I could influence people. Consciously, I think, honestly, it's really only been in the last year, maybe. And it's a lot of it's come with the book, and really allowing myself to open up to receive the feedback from people that are reading the book has been a really big thing. And even feedback from the people that did my 7-day Facebook training last year, and hearing their experiences through their perspective and being able to kind of look at myself through their lens. And the more that I've been able to see myself through the eyes of others is when I've really started realizing the power of my voice and the things that I have to gift the world with.
I just think it's interesting that when I talk about influence, or when people talk about influence, sometimes they have a negative connotation to it. Like, it sounds like you're influencing somebody to do something that they shouldn't be doing. But I know that most people who I respect, and just in general, when you think about the people who are, I don't want to even use the term influential in your life, there's something different about them. They can actually get that message across, and they're doing it.
It's been really humbling for me a little bit as well, is that like, I'm, again, just see myself as this like girl. And it's really cool for me to kind of stand back and see what these people are choosing to do with the information I'm giving them. Because again, I'm just kind of a catalyst. I'm a channel, I'm a whatever. And these people are doing it in their lives, but I get to be the one that kind of like sparks that for them, or ignites that thing within them. And it is fun. I guess this is the first time I've talked about this. I've never considered this before, but it really is fun. And it's an honor too, that like people trust me enough to put their lives in my hands, essentially.
So what do you think the secret to influence is?
For me, the biggest influence that I've had in my entire entrepreneurial career is being in alignment and really being that open vessel. And the more that I can be in integrity with myself, the more that I found that other people listen. So if I never recommend that anyone do anything that I wouldn't be willing to do myself. And so when I'm knee deep in the mud, like alongside everyone else, being like, I'm going through the same shit you're going through. Yeah, my business might be a little bit further along, or yeah, I might have a bigger platform or whatever, but like, I'm right there with you. And the more that I can be in my integrity, I found the more that other people respond to that and get on board with that and listen and resonate with it.
So then what are you manifesting for yourself next?
Well, the commitment that I made in January, the week the book came to me, was building a 7-figure business. So I'm in the midst of manifesting that. The book is a key integral part of that. There's some other things, obviously, that need to click into place for that to happen. But yeah, that's the biggest thing. So that, building a 7-figure business, and I am so ready to meet my husband. And so that's kind of the other thing, that every morning I'm just like, all right, universe, I'm open. This is me showing up.
Have you ever not gotten something you've manifested?
Probably. The funny thing about manifestation is that it usually comes in a way that you don't expect it. And so I know a lot of people that are like, this didn't happen. Like, I was trying to manifest this and this other thing came. And I'm like, well, technically it's the same thing. And they're like, well, no, it's not. I'm like, yeah, it just looks differently than you thought it was going to look when you decided you wanted it. So you still got what you asked for. It just showed up differently than you thought it was going to show up. So I think we always get what we manifest, but oftentimes we don't see it that way because we're so fixated on how it's going to show up or what it's going to look like or where it's going to come or any of these things that we fail to see it.
What would you tell somebody who's never kind of looked into manifestation? What exactly would you say that it is, or what's an easy practice to kind of get started if you are interested?
So our world, our universe, our earth, our planet, everything in our world, not to get too physicsy on you, but if you want like a more in-depth version of this, it's in my book. Everything in our planet is an energetic frequency and is a vibration. And so what happens is when you're in the energetic frequency of a certain thing, you will attract more of that. When you're in an energetic frequency where you're pissed off at everything, have you ever noticed how more things go wrong? Right? When you're in an energetic frequency of joy and love and happiness, have you ever noticed that like everything goes right? Or you know those people that are just naturally like that and their lives just seem so seamless. When you're vibrating, when your energetic frequency is vibrating at a certain level, you attract certain things into your life. So the idea behind manifestation is you get your internal state into an energetic frequency, an energetic vibration in alignment with what it is that you want to be creating in the world. And by doing that inner energetic realignment, your outer physical world has no choice but to realign with it. And so a lot of the things that I recommend, anyone that follows, like, I think it's Abraham Hicks, they talk about 17 seconds. So if you can manipulate your energetic frequency for 17 seconds at a time in alignment with whatever it is that you're desiring, that will start to shift things. And then, of course, if you take it from 17 seconds to 34 seconds, to like 68 seconds, right? And then the more often that you can be in that energetic frequency, the more that it cements as normal into your state of being, the more that it transforms your external world, your physical world.
So is it like a meditation? Is it just focusing on positive energy, or is it a breathing technique?
It can be a combination of a bunch of different things. The thing that I always recommend, and this is in the book as well, is a lot of people talk about visualization. And I totally like, the more that you can visualize into what you want, the better. But I say adding that secondary step of feeling into it as well. And that's where that like kind of vibratory state comes from. It's not just thinking about your manifestation. It's about feeling into it. Okay, so I want to be a 7-figure business owner. What does that feel like? Who is that woman? How does she carry herself? Does she have a different posture than I have? Does she have different thoughts than I have? And really like sitting in the feeling of what it feels like to be that woman on a regular basis. So one of my clients, we were in the month of visualization for the training program I run. And I said, your visualization doesn't happen in your head. It happens more in your heart, in your core, in your solar plexus. She was like, oh, so it's less of like visualization and more of like a feelization. And I was like, yeah, exactly. And then how do you connect with that every single day? I personally record it on my phone so that I can listen to it. And it's like my future self has sent me a voice memo from the future, and I get to listen to it and hear how awesome her life is. But in that moment, I'm existing as if that's my life, and I get to feel into what it feels like to be that woman.
So I know your big thing is helping women turn their, visions into realities. What about the women who don't know exactly what they want yet? What do you recommend?
I mean, the first step is to just commit to wanting something, right? Like if you don't know what you want, then the fact that you want something different is a great first step. You have to open up your energy. If you have closed energy, of course, there's going to be no information coming into you. But by opening up and starting to be inquisitive and being like, okay, well, I know I want something different. What could that look like? And just journeying down. And I always tell my women, like, especially when they're manifesting, write out 50 to 100 different ways that whatever you want could happen, or 50 to 100 different things that could be something new for you, and start playing. Throw spaghetti against the wall. Go take a class you've never taken. Go experience something you've never done before and start playing with it and feeling into how do you want to feel in the future? Okay, you feel depressed now. Oh, well, how do you want to feel joy in the future? How do you start to feel into joy now in the present so that you can transform that outer environment?
So then what are your top tips for women who do know what they want?
I would say, creating a visualization practice is super powerful because that's what's going to help you get the clarity about what the next steps are. Creating an inspired action practice of, instead of going out and seeking what the quote unquote experts say to do to build your vision has to come from you. The steps, the journey have to come from you. So start getting in tune with and getting in touch with what are your steps. Instead of going out and buying the 6 steps to blah, 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 find your 6 steps. Because if you're taking someone else's 6 steps, you're going to be creating their vision and not your own. And then the other thing I would say when you're really, really, really on the brink of growth is like hiring a coach, because I have never had as much expansion as I think 3-4 times I've hired a coach in my life. And it puts you so far out of your comfort zone, and it gives you no option but to succeed. And that's why I hired my marketing guys, is I knew that if I didn't hire them, I wasn't going to write a book this year because I could not write a book. But if I'm invested in writing a book, I don't have a choice. I was like forcing my own hand to go do what it was that I knew I wanted to do.
So if people can't afford you, what do you recommend in terms of finding a coach? What qualities should you look for?
I'm actually getting ready to put an article up online about how I think when you have an initial consultation with a coach, it's always the coach like interviewing you. And I actually think that the tides need to be turned a little bit on that. I actually really encourage any woman getting on the phone with me. I'm like, you should be asking me a ton of questions. And if you don't have any questions to ask me, here's 6 good ones to start out with. And you really need to tap into the integrity of the coach, because a lot of the coaching industry has been, oh, I just want to do this, so I'm just going to do this. And I'm not to say I am not a certified coach. Hands down, not a certified coach. I also have 3 decades of training experience. I have 2 decades of leadership experience, and I have a decade of entrepreneurial experience. And when I say tapping into the integrity of the coach, ask them the last time they spiritually bypassed. Ask what happens when they face challenges in their life. Ask how they deal with when shit hits the fan. What do they do in their life? Ask them why they became a coach in the first place. Because unfortunately, a lot of people have become coaches because it's easy and it's quote unquote lucrative right now. So really do your due diligence. Put this person through the test and ask them the questions you need to ask to know whether or not they're your person. And then there's also all sorts of other options. I mean, I have digital training programs on the market that are like $100. I have a group training program that's, a third of the cost that my private is. Like, most coaches have different options, but know yourself well enough too to know if you need a private one-on-one kind of environment, or if a group works better for you. Like, know yourself enough to know what you need, what kind of coach you need behind you, and then hire that person.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know I'm crowding in her apartment right now with her cats, but she definitely has the design stuff going on. I wish you guys could all see it.
The costume that is currently on my mannequin is legit a 1990s Disney store Cinderella costume. Like, that's vintage.
So where can people find you?
You can find me all over the internet at Bri Seeley. My website is briseeley.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Bri Seeley. And pretty much, I think I'm like the only Bri Seeley on the internet.
Well, thank you so much. And Bri's book, Permission to Leap, will be available on November 14th. Where can they find it?
Just Google either Bri Seeley or Permission to Leap on Amazon, and it should come up. It's available in paperback and Kindle.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Bri.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Beyond Influential. If you found value in this week's episode, please rate and subscribe on iTunes. I'd love to know who you find influential. You can let me know on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Brittany Crystal, Krystle, or visit my website, brittanycrystal.com.
Beyond Influential.